All right, here we go. What is up, Patreon crew? Thank you so much for tuning into this after show. We have Scott and Jenny here for just a little bit of time, so we're going to try to get through as many questions as we can that didn't get asked during the main show. One thing that Jenny just brought up is a mutual friend, Glenn Takayama, is a local photographer, race photographer, and runner. He's so great. And he's like, oh, I wish you'd talk more about the Pacific Northwest. So let's talk about the Pacific Northwest. What are the trails you miss the most? What are some of those trails that you ran all the time?
Definitely Tiger. And I have to give Glenn a shout out because he was my original OG, like trail running buddy. He and Charlie Chrisman, that old Cascade Crest director.
Oh yeah.
Those were my homies every Saturday. But yeah, I miss the Tiger trails the most.
I have to say, I spent so much time, like Mount Si obviously was great and there were other places, but Tiger was like the staple. It was like where you went to do your runs. And I guess the Nook Trail would have been, I spent a lot of time at Cougar, a lot of time at Squawk, particularly after they started building more trails up there and they connected them. But I'd have to say, like, the Nook Trail was kind of legendary. Like, it was just, such a cool name and it was so steep and it was like, that's the way you start out a run. I remember when Jim Kirby, he was the first person who took me out on 12 Peaks because Scott McCougar was injured, so he couldn't do a 12 Peaks with me. And he enlisted Jim to do it. And I just, so many fond memories of that day out there and Jim showing me the route. And then there were no like great maps. There was one DNR map and he was like, okay, you got it down. And I had to memorize the route basically by memory versus, and I just remember, okay, this route here. And a lot of things were overgrown, like the Middle Tiger Trail was classic. I used to go out there and clear that after the salmon berries popped up. So it was really cool. Fun memories for sure.
There's
say Nook Trail is one of your favorite.
I love that you said that Nook. Because every time we turn off of Bus Trail to go up Nook, there's like 300 feet of it that I'm going, this is my favorite trail.
Yeah.
Because it's so mossy and so lush and it's part of our Tiger Claw course, which I'm really excited about. Like, I was like, this is what I want the course to start on. And so I love that you said that because we just were on it yesterday and my legs still hurt. It's one of those notorious ones. There's also a trail on Cougar that was one of my very first runs up here. I was going to
ask about that too.
Yeah, I forget about the name of it, but I think
the name either.
I think Scott created it, so I think he might remember the name of it. There's one that goes up to Wilderness Peak, but it's essentially through the Salal off of the switchbacks.
Yeah. So, oh man, what is that one called too? I know it's
not DeLeo Wall.
Well, there's DeLeo Wall. That's, that one that used to be kind of like, and that's not on Wilderness anymore, but, or not on Wilderness, but DeLeo Wall, like there's just some classic names.
Yeah.
What was that one that went straight up? Was it, and it's not the Wilderness Peak. Yeah,
Wilderness Peak has the bench that has no view. There's like no view at the top, but there's I think I was running with Ben and Ben's like, oh hey, it was also snowy. He's like, hey Ethan, I'm gonna let you lead, but there's gonna be a trail that you're gonna go to the right. Just take that right. It's gonna be a small little like footpath. I was like, oh okay. And we get to it and I go, is this it? And he's like, yeah, just go right. That's Scott Jurek's trail. Like that's the one that he used to run all the time. And I went, oh, Scott did it, so I want to do it. And it's like, it's dumb. It's so steep.
It is. Yeah, it is pretty dumb. And I can't even remember the name of that one. There's so many names. It probably has a real boring name because I remember all the ones that have the great names.
All my friends are texting me like, you're an idiot. How do you not remember? It's blank. I think every time I forget. Anyways, there's so many stories that I want to know about the Northwest. I just don't even know where to begin. So let's get to some of these questions from our wonderful live audience.
Yeah, this is a question for both of you. If you can pick one accomplishment from your running career, what are you most proud of and why?
Only one. Well, just because it's so comprehensive and it was so big and vast, would be the Appalachian Trail record, even though it wasn't a race. But if I were to pick one race, it was my 2004 Western States record. And just setting that record, it was something I wanted to do. Mike Morton was one of my idols, and the fact that he was the first non-Californian to win. It was just one of those dreams of mine, and just always seeing if I could get closer to Mike's time. So that was probably, if I were to pick race-wise, that would probably be the pinnacle.
I mean, for me, it has to be just the UTMB finish. And I mean, I was in the back, and it took me forever, but I finished. And I felt like, I was still working for Patagonia, and I had this set amount of days off, and this was like my one shot at doing it. So I went over and I did it. And so I'm kind of proud of that.
Awesome. Bushido Trail. It was the Bushido Trail.
Oh, Bushido.
Oh, yeah.
That's the good thing about. Okay, sorry.
So it didn't even have a name. That's the thing. Okay, I didn't know that's what you're like.
Okay.
I knew what you were talking about, but I was like, oh, is it?
It never really had a name when we used to run it, but then
Don Mukai had them like label it, and like the sign and the bench up there dedicated
so
to
now it's called Bushido. So. Yeah, okay. But back then it didn't really have an official name.
I can imagine a lot of the trails that are out there now probably were goat paths. I mean, it's changed a lot. Those 3 mountains have changed a lot, I bet, probably since you were training on them regularly.
Tiger was always changing. I mean, the logging roads. Yeah. I mean, that was the hardest thing. You couldn't sometimes do a real 12 peaks. I remember getting, like chased by guys in logging trucks, hollering because we weren't supposed to be in a certain area. And it was like training for Western States, got to do 12 summits and 12 peaks. And it was always changing. So a lot of times they'd build the logging roads right over the trails. And so we just have to like basically bushwhack up stuff. So yeah, it was always changing. So I imagine it's vastly changed.
Yeah, we had the Slabies on after they did the ISSI 100 route, and they took pictures of parts of Tiger where it was clear cut 2 days before it hadn't been touched. And then when they got there, the trail was completely like logged over. Yeah. And they had to basically go all over. It was crazy how much time that added to their ISSI 100 attempt. Sorry, diverting.
Question from Robin in the chat room. Robin wants to know, how much are you guys a part of creating the vests for Ultimate Direction?
Yeah, gear.
Oh, definitely. I would say, Jenny and I, from the get-go, when Buzz took over the helm at Ultimate Direction, he wanted individuals that were really, and I had been using Ultimate Direction packs for a long time, and it's still to this day, we were just over there. I was over there a few weeks ago with Raven, in fact, working on something.
To be clear, they have different designers, and some previous designers didn't want the athlete feedback as much. So that was a real bummer. And so we won't mention which packs those were, but the new designer is awesome and wants all the feedback and wants the fit. And so we're really involved in the latest ones.
That's cool.
And the vision was still there in the beginning.
The vision has always been there. It's just like timing and stuff and personalities and stuff. But the latest, we're definitely way more involved now. Except for the Jenny vest, original Jenny vest, that was like,
where Jenny actually
all in.
was the designer of that. So she actually did all the drawings.
But now it's gone. So
I'm always really curious about that because, I review gear. I get gear all the time to test out, and I am so picky. I'm so picky. And so when I try something that maybe an athlete has put their name on, like the Speed Goat, Hoka Speed Goat, right?
Right.
His namesake and everything, that first version, I tried it. I was like, there's no way Carl approved this. There couldn't be. And I had talked to him after our show that we had him on, and he's like, yeah, that shoe was a piece of shit. Like the second version, he's like, I love it. The second version, I love it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's the shoe. I was like, yeah, this is amazing, that sort of thing. So I'm always curious about that.
Yeah.
Is that up to the designer?
I feel like once they get things up and going, a lot of companies will just have, myself or Jenny or both of us come in and do little pieces. Because once they feel like, okay, we've got the backbone. That's what Jenny was saying. Like some designers really let you in, and early on, the first few years, it was like crazy. And then the fourth and fifth years, definitely still. But there's some little, sometimes a season or two where they just kind of change things, and they're like, oh, it's still has Scott's DNA in it, or Jenny's design DNA that she worked on. So it's still there. It's just some years or some designers let you in more and want to utilize you more.
Yeah. Let's get to maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah, a question from Connor. Connor asks, what do you think of the trend towards extreme distances like Moab 240 and Tahoe 200?
So we, in this, I can speak from this more than just say a armchair ultra and somebody who's like ultra enthusiast, because Jenny and I actually crewed our buddy Luis Escobar, Coyote, who we write about in North. And so we crewed him on the Tahoe 200, and Jenny and I were just like 200-mile races. This is
well, there's always been the Tour de Géants. Like there's always been them, but they're way more popular now. And we kind of were like, okay.
And we're like, we're gonna spend 2 days like following you around, you know.
But it sounded fun. We loved how it was pretty. And guess what? It was awesome. It was
Like,
really impressed. Gotta hand it to Candace. Like it was top notch.
And I look at it as I was thinking to myself, I wouldn't want to race a 200-miler, even though something like the AT, I did 50 miles a day. But I could see if somebody was like, hey, I want to go to some amazing place and I want to run around Lake Tahoe, for instance, or I want to run across Moab and the desert there, having basically aid stations and treating it as an adventure run. I know some people race it, but for some people, I think more than anything, it's just a way to have support for a 200-mile distance, some place that they want to visit and run through. And I think it's great. I look at it, their adventure runs, and the Tour de Géants, like even though some people race it, or the Tahoe 200 and some people race it, it still has this element to me is like, for most people, it's their way of like going and having support on this big adventure run. Because you look at people, and the people that race, it does not look like fun.
But it was really cool.
It was,
I mean,
yeah, it was
I
neat to see.
want to do one. I was like, that seems kind of fun.
It's kind of like 48-hour races. I'm not like a huge fan of them. I kind of like, okay, 24 hours is where I start. Like personally, 6-day road races to me, and 48 hours, it's like, okay, after a while, like you really start to get into that level of sleep deprivation and just body depletion that I'm not sure. I don't know, but to each their own. So I think it's cool. Again,
we've heard
I applaud
from
people
both
who do that.
sides of that coin of like the people who are racing the 200s and like, oh, it's the biggest, pushing of the body you'll ever experience, and the people who are just out there like, it's an adventure. It's a 4-day adventure. It's easier than running 100 because you get to just sleep and take the breaks and stuff. Let's get to one more question.
Yeah, a question from Nancy in the chat room. Nancy asks, is it ever too late for someone to get into ultras? I'm turning 40 and you're such an inspiration. I've been running for 20 years, but never an ultra.
It's never too late. In fact, I thought she was going to say I'm 60 or I'm 70. 40, you're like young. Like you've got like at least 20 more years of ultras in you. I started when I was 20, but most people start when they're 40, 50. I mean, I've even, hung out with 60-year-olds and have friends who started really late in life. And so it's not unheard of to start at 70, for instance. I know that's like not, but we're seeing people do things at certain ages where you're like, what? That makes no sense at all. But so I'd say, yeah, there's no perfect age. And obviously you're not going to be at your best at 40. So I think like trying to find ways to keep it fun and exciting and age group stuff, just go out there and have fun and set some goals for yourself. But I think some people, when they've been running for 20 years, now they're going to place all this pressure on themselves. Like, okay, I'm doing new distances. So therefore, I've got to like excel at a certain level. And I'd say just go out there, because running miles and years are kind of like dog years. Like you notice it. And I still feel like my best, I had a 7 to 10 year window of my best racing years. And I'm still going to have fun and I still can push myself. But don't be so hard on yourself. So just enjoy the ride and the experience.
Just go to an ultra and look at the people crossing the finish line.
Yeah, exactly.
I've definitely been passed by a 60 or 70-year-old.
As have I.
Sure.
100%.
Yeah.
And you can still have fun. Like it's not like, now I have to run twice as far and I have to like train twice as hard. If this individual's been running for 20 years, she could go out tomorrow and run a 50K or a 50 miler. So I would say, I forget the woman's name, but run a 50 miler as your first one. So
whoa,
yeah, I really want the full ultra experience. Okay. Go out there and do a 50 miler. Don't feel like you got to step up. If you've done a marathon, you're totally fine running. I ran my first marathon a month later, ran my first 50 miler.
And I have to say, White River is like my all-time favorite 50 miler.
Northwest.
Yeah, Northwest Classic.
Yeah.
But I think then she'll really feel like she's going out into that ultra space, which is important, I think.
I think it's great advice, Nancy. If you could report back after you finish your 50 miler, we'll report back to the church.
Using my name,
Yeah.
She's just gonna be wearing a shirt that's like, Scott, maybe do this. Like a huge thank you again to our wonderful guests tonight, Scott and Jenny Jurek, who spent a lot of time with us, just answering our questions and giving us advice and insight and all that good stuff. It's what a wonderful show. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Patreon crew. We love you guys so much. We appreciate all the support month after month. You're the reason that we're able to do this. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Tiger Class coming up on May 4th. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do between now and then, but we'll be updating you in the coming weeks with how that all unfolds and all the things that we're prepping right now, which is pretty exciting. So stay tuned. Patreon.com/thegingerrunner. That's it. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest, everyone. Thanks, Scott and Jenny.
Thank you, guys.